Hello everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Paddock Pass podcast. We're talking about the Grand Prix of Aragon. We're going to give our stonking review to this very fine spectacle of a race that we've had almost at the halfway stage of the 2025 MotoGP season. As you might be able to see with those watching on YouTube, we're sat in the former press conference room here at Motorland. Still very sunny in the background. The teams haven't all quite packed up. Of course, there's the second one-day test in the midst of the season to take place tomorrow, so plenty of laps still to be run here in Aragon. As ever, I'm joined by Neil to my right and also David. David, are you paying attention?
I am paying attention.
Please stop clattering your mouse around on the table.
Yes, I promise.
And did you say stonking action? Have you been supping from a hip flask this afternoon, Ad? Or
I said, did I say stonking action?
It
I think
was
it was just stonking Grand Prix.
right?
It was a stonking Grand Prix.
It was hot. There we go. So steamy. Perhaps steamy is a better descriptive word.
Steamy.
Before we get too far into this podcast, a reminder, everybody, that we are backed by renthal.com. If you have a street bike and you're after a first-class, high-quality accessory, then go to renthal.com, the street section, and use the Fit My Bike tool to fit exactly what you need to the motorcycle that you have in the garage. Pole position travel as well. For the people lucky enough, perhaps, to have come to Aragon this weekend, they would have found some accommodation and some first-class treatment here at the Grand Prix if they travelled with pole position travel. Go to polepositiontravel.com and enter PPOD25X for a small discount for listening or watching the Paddock Pass podcast. Neil, what was your moment of this Grand Prix?
Well, I don't think the MotoGP race was all that exciting, if I'm being quite honest, and I'm waiting for Dave to say sacrilege
No,
and shout at me.
I won't say sacrilege.
But
no, you're entitled to your opinion, however wrong it is.
Yeah. So I'm going to plump for something that happened in Moto 2 because I thought Dennis Onju's last corner move on Diogo Moreira to win the Moto 2 race at the last gasp was stunning. He had been super strong in that part of the track all weekend long. And the fact that he decided to go around Moreira's outside because the Brazilian successfully defended on the inside line, managed to get by a little bit of elbow on the way to the finish line, and to just nab him by 0.03 of a second was pretty special. And I think it was made all the better by the fact that when I asked him afterwards, why have you been so good in that part of the track all weekend? You've been 0.2 faster than anyone else, more or less. He said, big balls, which I think was my quote of the day as well.
It was a fantastic pass. And, I mean, it looked like he'd lost it on the way into 16. And he just, carried the speed, came up, and then you could see Moreira catching him, but he couldn't quite make it. It was amazing.
There was a very obvious contender and winner of our Paddock Pass podcast, rider of the Grand Prix. I'm sure we'll come on to him in due course. However, Onju got, I think, 30% of the vote by the time we were recording, which I think goes to show that a lot of our listeners felt that was maybe the moment of the weekend as well.
It's an Onju track, though, isn't it? Podiums in Moto 3, took his first podium in Moto 2 here last year, but it's not disqualifying it at all. And also the zeal this guy has for celebrating victory, I think, is unmatched by any other rider. It's a little bit out there. Dave, what was your moment?
My moment of the day was Pecco Bagnaia versus Pedro Acosta in the opening laps. There was a proper little backwards and forwards, and it was the first glimpse that Pecco was back. He looked like Pecco Bagnaia again, instead of the sort of sad fellow riding around hoping for a miracle. And it went on to... It just went to show that, the change can happen, and that Pecco Bagnaia isn't lost, and the championship is still there.
The Grand Prix, of course, was a bit of a Marc Marquez benefit, but there were sort of pockets of action, and my moment of the Grand Prix was basically the fight between Franco Morbidelli and Fermin Aldeguer, the two Fs, Fermin and Franco. It was great stuff. I mean, typical Morbidelli, very uncompromising. I actually thanked him in his media debrief afterwards for providing that action. He just looked up and said, "It was a pleasure." And Neil, you were asking him if he could sort of describe a little bit the sensation of going through that, some very sketchy moments there between the rookie and the Brazilian, and he said something about bottling the adrenaline or offering it as a shot.
Pure adrenaline. I make you adrenaline.
He wasn't Russian, Dave.
No, he wasn't. But he might as well have been.
Yeah, bit of Dolph Lundgren Rocky 4 vibes going on.
Can I just say I'm super surprised that Dave's moment of the weekend wasn't the Marc Marquez brothers celebration in front of the Marquez fan club at the end of the race. That crazy dance was so out there.
That's exactly the kind of thing that I love, and I definitely, if it was me, I definitely wouldn't be losing on purpose, so I didn't have to do that.
Neil, pivotal perhaps to the rest of this podcast review, who do we think loves Motorland Aragon more, Dave or Marc Marquez?
It's a very, very close run thing, Ad. Although I would probably say Marc Marquez, because he's probably in some bar in Madrid round about now by the time we're recording.
He's got a test tomorrow. So
of course he's still in fact,
there in spirit.
Okay, sorry, he's probably in his motorhome with a couple of glasses of champagne and living it up, as they say, whereas Dave is stuck here with us. So I'm going to say Mark's probably the one that loves Aragon a little more than Dave at this moment in time. But yeah, I mean, you said it was very much his weekend. The writing was on the wall from the very first session, and everyone else just seemed completely resigned from the first session from Friday. Alex Marquez did a decent job of keeping him honest throughout the weekend. A flawless weekend from Alex, but even he said on Saturday, you're putting a lot of risk in to even stay with Marc, and there's no guarantee that you're even going to beat him. You probably have to just be realistic and understand that he's not just one step ahead of us, he's 1.5 steps ahead of us compared to normal. So, this was his weekend.
Dave, it wasn't being overly cynical to say that the race was over within the first 5 seconds, because after Marquez made that start from pole position on the grid, on the right side on the racing line, we had been told by Dorna that the grid had actually been cleaned. It seemed that the starts both in Moto 3 and Moto 2 went off without a hitch. Nothing compared to some of the wheel sort of spin and rolling burnouts that we'd seen yesterday in the sprint. Theoretically, the race was over. Did I see a statistic somewhere that it was 10 years since someone had clean swept a Grand Prix, and it was Marc the last time he did it? 2015, 2013. There was some time like that when he headed absolutely every session.
There was a stat, and if you gave me 5 minutes and I could be bothered, I'd look it up on my computer. But it has been a long time since anyone did it, and I think it was Marc who was the last person to do it.
Just an appreciation of Marquez. I mean, there was nobody,
no.
even
I
close.
wouldn't say. I don't think it's fair to say that it was the race was over within 5 seconds, because Alex kept him honest for a while. But it was clear that Alex had nothing. There was no beating Marc, but he put pressure on Marc for a long time, and it wasn't until sort of about the halfway mark that it was very clear that nothing was going to happen. No, there was no stopping. Well, the only thing that was stopping Marc Marquez was Marc Marquez, and when he started doing those low 40s or those sort of like mid 46s, he first.
It was a ridiculous sequence, wasn't it?
Yeah,
like 4 in a row or something.
Yeah, absolutely bonkers. And then like a 46.7, I think was the lap record, 9/10 faster than the previous record from 2022. That was really fast, and you did start to think, is he going to stay on board? Is he not going to throw this away? So, that was the only scenario under which he did not win. But I think also he had very much been he'd learned his lesson at Jerez, in Austin, in Silverstone, and was determined to bag the 25 points. The other thing he did say in the press conference is, you come here, you have to get the points. You have to get the points.
Yeah, he said it was mandatory.
Yeah, exactly. It's mandatory. You can't, a track where you are strong, where you have the confidence, you have something extra, you can't come away with anything less than maximum points.
Yeah, Alex was saying, where Marc has always been so strong here. Turn 10's called the Marc Marquez corner for a reason. Always, from his earliest days in MotoGP, he was able to make the difference there. Alex says somehow he's using less meters on the track there, yet carrying more speed and spinning the rear tire less, and that's probably just a whole mixture of things: body position, throttle control, every single lap on that kind of particular part of the track, he just had that little bit of an edge, which could give him half a tenth, 1/10 over his closest pursuer. He was also saying that he made a bit of a reversion to his setting from the earlier part of the season. We know that he had new chassis in Le Mans, I think, which he also was using at Silverstone. I'm not sure if that meant that he went back to his original chassis, but he said the setting that he had for this weekend, gave him that kind of confidence, that feeling that he had during pre-season, then in the first couple of races of the year. As Dave said, those earlier mistakes were really in his mind. I kind of feel like he probably could have won this race by 7-8 seconds if he really put the head down, but you kind of just felt that he was tootling along in the kind of low 1 minute 47s, and I think at one point he said, you know what, I think I can go a bit faster just to keep the concentration, and then he set that fastest lap, 3 laps from the flag.
Yeah, I mean, the speed was definitely more about not falling off, ironically, by sort of like pushing himself, trying to see how fast he can go, and then settling back down again.
It was an exercise in control, and you could argue that started even from the pre-event press conference on Thursday, where Marc was not elaborating too much on his approach to the weekend, but the point I think he got across was complete focus.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm not going to make the same mistakes I made in Austin or in Silverstone or in Jerez. You know, Silverstone, of course, he managed to save the day thanks to the restart. You know, this was he said afterwards, it had to be, the victory was mandatory, especially after last year where he was so dominant as well on the GP23. As ever, guys, we've been recording our paddock note shows through the weekend. Get on patreon.com if you want to hear those. There was a great one with Peter Baum on Thursday as well. And Dave, you're going to be linking up with Peter tomorrow for the test to bring a joint podcast roundup. All sounds very twee. So listen out for that one. But as ever,
we should do it in Dutch. Just to that would be the funniest thing ever.
Start off by naming all the corners at the TT Assen, Circuit Assen. But as ever, we like to ask our Patreon followers and listeners for questions. Post GP, and the rapid people will manage to send them in. First of all, we have Tyler Ryan says, how quickly could Marc have gone if he was really pushed? Ironically, he would have gone slower, right? Because he would have had to faff around like Pedro Acosta and Bagnaia were for a degree, and also Firmino Daguerre and Franco Morbidelli. If you're in a slugfest, then you're not going to be enacting your own race rhythm and setting all those records.
Yeah, I mean, well, maybe contrary to what I just said, that he probably could have gone even faster and won the race by, several seconds rather than just a handful of seconds that he won by. I think the race was something like 35 seconds faster than last year's race time, but then I think, a massive chunk of that is down to the track conditions. They were notably worse last year. We had 3 days of kind of clear running here, great conditions, and really by the end of the race we saw all of the riders basically setting their personal best lap times or their fastest lap times in the last 3 or 4 laps. Last year the track was just a complete disaster, and it rained after every day, I think, as well, which meant that we were kind of starting afresh with the rubber being bedded in, which is a roundabout way of saying that although Marc could have gone even faster, he still was, we were still going way quicker than last year.
Maybe kind of related to this, and still coming up in the show, we're going to be talking about Pecco's mini revival, RKTM back. What the fuck happened to Yamaha this weekend? Maybe Honda to a degree, even though it was Joan Mir's best result for almost 2 years. We'll be doing our highs and fires, and of course our grades. But Dave, in a paddock note show the other day, you claimed to have discovered the critical failure of the GP25. We all thought that you were going to don a red shirt, you'll be off into the paddock, and we wouldn't see you again. You'll be ignoring all of us. You wouldn't be talking to any of us anymore. It didn't prove to be the case. But we had some questions. TV Room Raccoon, Dwayne Nutt, and Barry Power said, what happened with Pecco between Saturday and Sunday? What changed? What parts? How is this guy who's been giving us debriefs where he's looked beyond dejected, and he said that I think, Neil, you asked him if he was in maybe the most sort of difficult situation of his career, and he straight up said yes, to now suddenly getting back on the podium and even talking of going to Mugello and perhaps trying for a full victory in a row.
The funny thing is, we were talking about this with Peter Baum in the car on the way in this morning, and he was saying, you know what, it could be just something as simple as the brakes. It could just be that he needs a different master cylinder or something, give him something, a different feel, a bit more confidence, just so that he feels that he's got more control over the brakes and went in. And in fact, amazingly, Peter Baum was absolutely right. Well, he wasn't absolutely right. He was very close to being right. What happened was Ducati switched from the 340 discs to the 355 discs, which are the massive dinner plate carbon discs that they put on usually for places like Mugello, Motegi, Austria, Thailand. The reason what happens there? You're putting a lot more weight on there, but you also get a different feel in the lever. The way that the heat dissipates, you get a more aggressive feel on the brakes. Fabio Di Giannantonio was really, really good at explaining to us the difference in the feel.
I thought you were going to hug him at one point.
I came very close to doing so. The other thing is, because you've put a little bit more weight on the front, you have to sort of compensate it, but there's this extra weight on the front wheel, and that gives you, again, it changes the weight bias a little bit. There's just a tiny little bit more weight on there. But I think most of all, it just gives that little bit more feeling. Maybe it helps the bike, or the front wheel will turn in slightly more slowly, so it doesn't feel like when you force the front that it's oversteering so much. It feels, because everything's moving more slowly, and we're talking fractions, we're talking absolute fingertip stuff here.
Well, that's a very important thing, because fingertips, on the lever, that's the feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing with Pecco. He is so sensitive. He can pick up all sorts of feelings. So even he said himself in the press conference, it was quite a small step, but it made a big difference. And Digi said the same thing. It's a small change, but it's a massive change. Partly because you have to reshuffle everything, but it just changes his feeling with the brakes. It changes his feeling with the front end, and it gives him the confidence that he wanted.
Yeah, it was a decent turnaround. Not the first time we've seen a turnaround of this ilk for Pecco during a weekend. 12th in the sprint, where he just looked so listless, to third today. And Jack Miller was really interesting on Saturday. Pecco was so far back that he was actually among the Yamahas who had a nightmare weekend. We'll come on to them in a little bit. But Jack was just saying, I've spent so many laps behind Pecco in my career, and normally he uses his body so much to turn. Hangs off the bike. He said his inside shoulder is normally at the same level of the bike, when it's leant over, hanging off it. And he said he just looked like so much more neutral, which just told you that he had so little confidence. But yeah, this little kind of thing, sometimes you hear this in motorcycle racing, where it is just this kind of little change which suddenly gives some kind of semblance of a feeling, and then you suddenly feel like, oh, okay, this is my bike again, and we can go again. And I think one of the things that Pecco's been saying recently is just that he's been able to ride essentially in the same way since 2020. Like, he's always had confidence in the front. He's always been able to brake, most of the time he's been able to brake super aggressively, super late, the way he likes to do it. And this has been a bit of a sea change for him, and he hasn't really had to adapt his riding style in a considerable way for some time, probably since he stepped up into MotoGP. So that, I think, has been a factor as well. But he was trying to kind of. It was quite strange in the press conference. Normally the Marquez brothers, or Marc is the one that's getting a barrage of questions come his way. Yeah. Pecco was basically fielding the entirety of the press conference, and he was saying at the end of it, look, we need to kind of confirm this tomorrow and see it at another track. But it does bode well, because Mugello, Assen coming up, 2 Pecco tracks.
Yeah, it seems a little unbelievable that it's just a matter of a disc. You know, you do wonder, especially it probably is the case for KTM guys as well, where they're almost turning the bike upside down to try and find something to cure chatter, vibration, just a lack of, chronic understeer. But then, Ducati just throw on a different brake disc, and Bagnaia seems to be reinvigorated.
And Digi said first thing on the list for it was really high up on the list to test for him on Monday.
Just before we move on, could I just throw out there that we should really mention Alex Marquez. I know he's finished second in about 1 trillion races that we've had this year.
The establishment now. It's the furniture, isn't it?
It's just boring now, isn't it? It's not even that remarkable. But, he did do I thought he did just a magnificent job.
And how so, Neil?
Well, it was...
Magnificence is maybe a little bit over the top, right?
But no one's getting close to Marc this weekend. He at least got close. And I think, there was a lot of expectation on his shoulders. Tricky conditions. You could argue that he's on a better package than his brother is. The GP24, there's no doubt that it is a kind of more rounded package than the GP25 at the moment. But I just thought, Alex played this weekend just right. Pecco did challenge him at some points, but he kind of just had him at arm's length, had it completely under control as well, you felt, in that battle for second. Even after Marc has been so dominant and had, double victories in 4 races now 4 rounds this year. He's only 32 points off the championship lead, with some potentially really good tracks coming up for him and the GP24. And you're looking at how far Pecco is away from him in the championship, 61 points behind. He's 86 ahead of Franco Morbidelli. So you'd say even at this stage, he's nailed on for a top 3 in the championship, which is, still pretty remarkable. I think it's just worth mentioning because it's kind of become so commonplace this year that we forget about Alex sometimes.
Exactly. And also, just as it was important for Marc to get maximum points at a track where he is so strong, it's also just as important, and there's just as much pressure on Alex Marquez to only lose those, what is it, 8 points, I thought, or something. Like, he gave away 8 points. Those 8 points were inevitable. He was always going to lose those 8 points, but he could have lost a lot more if he did tried harder.
Yeah, he's stuck in this void now where he's best of the rest. Can't afford to falter from that position. And then the pressure is on for when or if Marquez does, the senior Marc does falter, then he has to take advantage of it like he did in Jerez. If he doesn't, then it's almost...
As Marc said, when we get to Barcelona, Alex is going to kick his ass. This is the thing. Marc is not going to get it all his own way for the rest of the season. It's not going to be Marc first, Alex second for the rest of the season. Mugello, if Pecco has truly found something, truly fixed something, Pecco is outstanding around Mugello. That becomes very, very interesting. Assen, again, really strong Pecco track. What's Alex going to be able to do around there? Because, again, it feels like... his performance in previous years is not necessarily a good guide to what he's capable of.
Let's leave Pedro Acosta aside for the moment because it was a little bit of a resurgence for Ducati. We had not only the Morbidelli and Aldiguer battle, but of course, the GPs filling the podium once more. Dave, you kind of called BS on Marc's claim that he's essentially riding a GP24 on Saturday. Just to give a very succinct summary why?
Because he's not. Because he's riding a GP25. What they've done is, I've said this before, the GP25 is basically, they've want to get more power, so they've changed the weight distribution, and then the changes that they've made, they've then tried to compensate for by matching the geometry to the GP24. In Silverstone, he had a new chassis, but he was back to the old chassis here. He's playing mind games, but like everyone was calling bullshit on him. It wasn't just me calling bullshit on him. Franco Morbidelli was calling bullshit. So they said, I raced against him. No way is that a GP24.
I was slightly disappointed that in the press conference today you didn't say, "Oh, you're full of S," because you were pretty much going up to everyone yesterday after his debrief saying Marc is full of S, which I found quite entertaining. And yeah, you have to say he's doing this. He's just trying to get a bit of a rise out of his teammate, I think, or at least he's trying to make his head spin a little bit to think what is going on.
Surely Marc's too nice to be playing all these head games with Pecco.
Yes, that's right. Notably known for being really nice, fair play. Only not really interested. As long as he has a good game, doesn't really care about winning. Marc Marquez, famous for that.
The full truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth for Marc.
Indeed. Calais asks, whether, how important is tomorrow's test going to be for Pecco? Because considering the fact that we do head to Mugello and to Assen, to, pretty phenomenal tracks for the Italian.
Well, that's complicated. On the one hand, it is going to be really important to get the confirmation that this change has made the difference that he thinks it's made. I think Ducati have also got a number of parts to help with it, so this should happen. The trouble is, and we'll come on to this with for example, Yamaha and Honda and Zarco and stuff, this is such a strange track for a lot of reasons. It's not a good test track. It's quite, the grip is weird. It's either...
It'll be good tomorrow.
No grip. Yes, it's going to be fantastic. Well, it's going to be fantastic for Aragon tomorrow. So, yeah, it's really, really tricky. It's a very difficult... it's difficult to assess things. So... It's going to be important, the test tomorrow. It's going to be important to get confirmation, but also you can't be fooled by the fact that you're on a track which is a very unusual track, unusual demands, does unusual things to the bike. Lots of riders were saying, look, the setup we're using here, we don't use anywhere else.
Neil, 2026 is going to be weird because it's the end of a life cycle in MotoGP. But we had a question from Tom Groom saying, will the 2024 Ducati spec riders be happy with the GP25 next year?
They don't have to have the
Well,
G.
maybe they continue with the GP24.
Yeah.
It's not as if they have to go into the GP25. And throughout pre-season, both Marc and Pecco were adamant that there is more potential in the GP25 than the GP24. It could well be that come round 11, round 12, after tomorrow's test at Aragon, maybe after the Misano test, the GP25 takes a real definitive step, and suddenly it becomes the kind of the talk of the town and the bike that everyone wants to be on. At this point, no, I don't think they want to go that way, but there is still 20 million races left this season to try and kind of correct that.
Yeah, and just to clarify, at the end of any engine homologated for the 2025 season can also be used by any rider in the 2026 season. So next year, if Pecco Bagnaia wants to go back to a fully to a GP24, he can do it. Factory teams are a little bit complicated because a factory team, both riders have to use the same engine, so he'd have to persuade Marc over the head with a baseball bat. But in essence, everyone gets like a second shot at the available engines. They can't homologate anything new, but they can choose from what's already been homologated.
And very quickly, give me a two-line answer both. How much do the likes of Ducati invest in a 2026 model when you'd imagine 850s are already running in the background?
Refinements, small. You're looking for small improvements, nothing big. Aero will probably be very, very similar. They'll be looking for just like fine details.
Yeah, and there's that engine freeze for next year, so they can't develop or can't bring a completely new engine. So yeah, as Dave said, it's not going to be a revolution.
Let's kind of wrap up this Ducati segment with some words on Frankie Morbidelli and also Firmin Aldeguer. Morbidelli, I'm very glad that I put him into my fantasy team. Some good points there, and ironically he was kind of roughed up. I mean, there were people slowing his line throughout the weekend before we got to the Grand Prix, but Franco just doing his thing. I mean, he's very zen off the motorcycle, but on it I really won't want to cross him. If you have to try and pass him, good luck. But we did have a question from Nick Sabon who says, Firmin Aldeguer, Neil, I mean, I want to ask you about this because you spent especially the last couple of years watching him closely in Moto2. Are we talking about a special rider here or just a good rider on the best bike?
I'm inclined to say a good rider on the best bike. He has been super impressive this year, I have to say, after a fairly indifferent pre-season. Good in Sepang, not so good in Thailand. But really since Coda, you have to say he's consistently been there in the fight for the top six. He was always a super talented guy in Moto2, but kind of would not handle the pressure sometimes that well, was inclined to make really silly mistakes. But talent and natural ability and speed without question. So I think that he is a super talent on a brilliant bike. And I'm not going to go higher than that currently. But, every time we go through this, or each round that passes, I'm kind of inclined to say, maybe he could end up being a kind of MotoGP race winner fairly soon. I mean, his podium in the sprint race was really impressive, taking a risk with that medium rear tire when everyone else was on the soft. I think he was one of only two people to do that. And I liked his kind of response afterwards. I think the team were saying, go for the soft. And he said, you know what? I'm a rookie, I've got nothing to lose, and I feel a little more comfortable with the medium, so let's do that. He kind of trusted his own conviction, which is impressive for a rider of, 19, or maybe he's just turned 20? Anyway, still a very young rider.
I think the point that he's a rookie is very, very important because he keeps on saying it himself. I'm a rookie, there's no pressure. He could afford to take the risk because he was a rookie on the medium tire during the sprint race. He can afford to take risks, there's no pressure on him. If he, as long as he crosses the line and doesn't blow the bike up, the team are happy with him. Anything, top 5, they're delighted. Podium, they're amazed. So he can't really do much wrong. The parallel is with Pedro Acosta. If you look at what Pedro Acosta is doing this year, he's having a much tougher year because he could do whatever he liked last year. There was no pressure on him. He was in a satellite team, even though he had a factory contract, and he was a rookie. There was no pressure. Now, this year, there's a lot more pressure on him. He's not a rookie any longer, and he's having to really work on things. And I think that we don't really know the measure of Firmin Aldeguer this year. We wait until his second year when there is pressure and there is expectation to perform.
One more thing, another quick opinion. Should we be full of praise for riders that, seize the best opportunity, the best motorcycle and excel, or should we be more reverential to riders that switch brands, switch teams and still are able to keep a high level and show their talent? Because we're talking, if you think of the first camp, Marco Bezzecchi and Eja Bastianini, Pedro Acosta to a degree, even though he's having sort of trouble in his sophomore year. These riders that come in with a very formidable machine and are able to show straight away they can click. Is that sort of more attention-worthy?
I mean, if you think about Pecco Bagnaia, for example, like he had sort of, he had a modest rookie year, I would say. But yeah, the second year, how they build on that is where it makes the difference. I think rookie years, unless they really come in, someone like Marc Marquez, they come in, they blow it away. Valentino Rossi the same, Casey Stoner the same, made a real enormous impact immediately. And that's when I think that you can say that they're exceptional. Otherwise, wait for the second year, wait to see how they develop.
Well, let's move on. Red Bull KTM, or of course, both Red Bull KTM teams. Have they made forward progress? Is this, because Aki Ayo, for example, with the factory racing team, has been saying, this is a long-term switch, a long-term transition. He's saying that I'm trying to change the working practices, the way people are doing things inside the team. I don't think we could have seen the problems they had in Thailand and expected them to be solved by round 4. Acosta today finished, 4th? That's equaled his season best result. He's still saying stuff to us like, I need a new motorcycle now. It's not that I expect it, I need it. So there's still that high degree of urgency. He said he enjoyed the race for the first 5 laps. Other than that, he was struggling again. Brad Binder said he had a great feeling, but then just lost the front mysteriously while at a slower speed, a slower turn rate, I think. He said it was a bit of a bizarre crash, and Maverick Vinales is the same.
It sounds to me like Brad's crash was because he said, I had less pressure on the front. If you've got less pressure on the front, you're going to crash.
Yeah, I don't think it's a massive breakthrough for KTM. Yeah, it was the best weekend, and we had 3 of the riders qualifying well. They all went straight through to Q2 on Friday, which was I think the first time this year that they've done that. Pedro and Brad were running together in that fight for 3rd place early on. Pedro made a couple of moves on Pecco at turn 1, just couldn't quite get the bike stopped. He was consistent right the way through the weekend as well. He wasn't coming from like a terrible qualifying to get that result. It was pretty solid stuff. But he did say yesterday that when the grip is as low as it is here, it kind of limits the other bike's strengths, and therefore they're just naturally a bit closer. So I don't think it was that they made this massive step forward. I think it was more the conditions just played into their hands. We know Pedro's good at this track. We know he's very good at anti-clockwise layouts as well. Won here in Moto 2, double podium here last year. So I don't think it's a massive surprise that he was there. And then his comments afterwards, it wasn't as if he was basking in the delight of this 4th place. He was very much cracking the whip and saying, I'm gutted. I asked him, "Are you satisfied with this race?" Because it was a strong performance, really good performance. And he said, "No, I'm gutted. I'm really pissed off. I was I don't know how far he was off Pecco.
7 seconds. It's not that far.
Not that far.
Pecco was 4 seconds.
Sure, but yeah, still 4 seconds.
But Pedro just feels like he's completely given up on KTM already. It really feels like he has no enthusiasm for anything.
Well, the opposite, Dave, he's pushing them.
No, but I mean it's the opposite to his rookie year. Again, when you're a rookie, you also perhaps enjoy the attention. His enthusiasm, his joy, he just doesn't, like when he comes up to speak to us, it doesn't feel like he has any, like he wants to do it. He doesn't look like he's enjoying himself. It just really feels like he's consigned this to the and he's just sitting it out.
We mentioned Pedro, good ride. Binder was up there having a really good ride before he crashed. Maverick was really, really pissed off at the end of the day, just because he felt that was a fantastic opportunity that kind of passed him by. He said his weekend was completely conditioned and ruined essentially by a pretty standard qualifying performance where he was randomly losing the rear end unexpectedly through some of the long lefts they have here. But he was kind of saying, I had the pace to fight Pecco for 3rd. I mean, I could have been there if I had started well. I would have been up there in that kind of 3rd position fight. And, Maverick is inclined to say this. This used to be his common
his mode.
His modus operandi when he was in Yamaha, only if I could start so well. But he remounted after he crashed down at turn 12, and I went and checked his lap times. He set his fastest lap of the race at the end of 46.9, which is just 0.2 of a second off Marc's fastest lap. And he had been running faster pace than Pecco in those final laps. So, yeah, he did have that rhythm. So, Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with him. I think it was the 4th fastest lap of the race. Maverick on another kind of parallel universe could have been on the podium today.
KTM are another brand that desperately need this test tomorrow, Dave. They need more track miles. They also have the test team. I think that means probably Danny Pedrosa and Pol Espargaro in Barcelona next week. I'm not sure if they're using anybody else. Maybe Jonas Folger, if he's even still running laps for the factory. Mick is not doing any more testing for KTM, but
it's a joke.
I think, Brad Binder and both Enea Bastianini were 2 riders that said today they expect to be the first on track tomorrow and the last off it. So they have plenty of things to be working through. I think I find it hard to say, this is the beginning of the recovery. It was a good track and a good set of circumstances for them, but I really hope it is a recovery, because it was really refreshing seeing, a different manufacturer getting amongst it, especially with Marco Bezzecchi doing his thing at the rear of the field this time.
Absolutely. Okay,
well, listen, let's move on. Let's talk about the Yamaha. Like we were kind of saying, earlier on in the show, WTF. Does anyone want to explain what on earth happened to the Blue Brigade?
It was really interesting. There was lots of things going on. Fabio Quartararo had chatter. I think Jack Miller had chatter. Miguel Oliveira had a bit of chatter. Oliveira and Alex Rins were both saying that when they got a full fuel tank, when I say full fuel tank, this is both in the sprint with 12 litres, as the main race was 22 litres. The balance of the bike is just wrong, so they're really slow for the first sort of like half of the race. And then they get really, really quick for the second half of the race. This is sort of a fundamental thing, but I think it comes down much, much more to the nature of the track. As I said before, this is a weird track for a number of reasons. People were using setups that they don't usually use, and if you don't have the base setup, if you go to Jerez and you've got your base setup and you can take that to Mugello, adjust it to suit the nature of the track sort of thing, but you've got the same basic sort of geometry and weight balance of the bike, and it'll work. Here, you bring your Jerez base setting and you've got to fiddle around with all sorts of things, or you try something and it works really, really well and it surprises you, or it doesn't work at all and it surprises you. So I think it's more that Yamaha's problem is that they don't have a base setup, and I also really think that the years that they were running with just 2 bikes has really, really hurt them. They've lost so much data that they need time to catch up and get that base setting again, especially when they come to strange tracks like this. It'll be interesting to see, for example, in Austria, which is another sort of weird track. When they they'll be fantastic. They'll be fine at Misano. They test loads at Misano. They'll be good at Barcelona. They test loads there. They should be okay at places like Assen and Mugello. But yeah, there'll be 1 or 2 tracks where they get there and they go, "What the heck is going on?"
Yeah, 3 pole positions for Fabio, and he was almost on the edge of saying, if things work here, then I think we can talk about a comeback. But this was a little bit more of a reality check.
It was, yeah, and I think we have to factor in the fact that this has never been a good track for Fabio Quartararo. I think he had a 5th here in his first year in MotoGP, but aside from that, he's had, his performances here have been nothing short of disastrous. So there's that to play. Also, the super low grip that they encountered, pretty much through the weekend, kind of reminiscent of Argentina, another track that Fabio doesn't like, and low on grip, and they were hopeless there. Yet they showed up in Austin next time out, and Fabio was kind of fighting for the podium in the sprint race. So I'm not inclined to ring the alarm bell on this performance, because I think we've seen so much positivity from Yamaha, even if it's been a little bit random at times. Fabio saying, on Saturday at Silverstone that things were going to be a shit show, that the sprint had been a bit of a nightmare, and then he kind of rocked up on the Sunday and everything was, smelling of roses. But yeah, generally speaking, I think it was kind of more related to the track and the conditions that we had here.
Yeah, if you look, Augusto Fernandez finished ahead of Jack Miller and Miguel Oliveira, and I think that is because he has a better base setting. He's had some time on the bike. And also he's using some new stuff. The new engine, for the record, no V4s here. It's all inline 4s, even though they were improved versions of it. I think he just had a better basic. And to an extent, this is the same thing happened with Johann Zarco, who from Saturday to Sunday made a big step because they had to throw away the base setting they had and use a slightly different setting, and that worked all of a sudden. Like I say, it's a strange track.
Does it surprise you that the general outside world seems so thirsty and horny for Yamaha's V4? I mean, it does seem that everyone is.
It's a really big thing. It is a
It's
really
new,
big thing.
It's new.
It's new.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And also, there's a lot of
change.
people who really think it's going to be a silver bullet, and it's not going to be a silver bullet. With the V4, you've got to have a completely new setup. All of this data that they're gathering will be useful background info, but it's not the same. It's nowhere near
different
the same.
riding style.
Yeah, completely different.
Yeah, and there were some weird things happening to Yamaha. Like on Friday, all of the riders were finding as soon as they fitted the soft tire and tried to do fast lap times at the end of practice, they would get to the apex of the corner, try and turn, the engine braking would come in and cut in and really like cause them to get out of shape, and all sorts of weird stuff has happened. And this wasn't just to one rider, this was to 4 of them. So, slightly bizarre. It was never going to be a completely seamless trajectory back to the front, I don't feel. And, this was maybe a little hiccup along the way.
Yeah, and also electronics. They've had to work so much on electronics. They're a long way behind in electronics. Jack Miller has been really, really key in making big steps forward for electronics for Yamaha. I think he's made a big difference to their performance. Yes, this is it. But I think also, I mean, when the V4 comes, it is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. We don't even know if Fabio Quartararo is going to be any good on a V4. He might absolutely hate it. So let's see.
Well, like Neil said, those people who are horny for it will have to wait until Motegi, until we probably see the first unveiling of it in action, in anger, it should be said, in a Grand Prix scenario. But it's new, it's shiny. There we go. We like shiny things, don't we, Dave, in MotoGP?
We love shiny things. I mean, that's why I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Speaking of shiny things, our friends at Alpine Stars back our fantasy league. Has there been any bright hopes? Surely I must have gained some points this weekend after I took the incredibly shrewd move of boosting Marc Marquez.
Oh, you and I both had.
Really?
I think Steve got in on the act as well. Yes.
Yeah, same.
All of us. Okay.
Yeah,
well.
all of us. We all made really big steps forward in the overall standings. Precisely because we boosted.
Right. So I just feel like we're lowly manufacturing MotoGP. I've made progress, but you fuckers have all bounced up as well.
Well, you are up to 1,104th.
I'm at the 2,000s.
I mean, you were 2,203rd or something
That's
about
right,
2 weeks ago. So, it shows you that the margins are quite fine. Steve is up to 99th. I'm 122nd. Dave is 1,153rd. So, it seems as though it's been a decent weekend for all of us.
The thing is, Adam, you've still got 2 boosts left, and me and Neil have only got 1 boost left, and Steve has blown them all.
Oh, has he?
He spunked all of his boosts.
Brilliant. That's brilliant news.
That's boredom on the Isle of Man in the rain. That's what that is. Well, I'm just going to sit there and wait for Sachsenring and unload one there, and then I still have the Joker in the pocket. I can feel a little bit of a surge coming on.
Oh, wow. Kawasaki Ninja is the leader of our league. Team Red Rocket, I think, is second, and Laura team is third. So, those 3 guys and girls are on it.
The Hire and Fire section of our podcast, I'm going to go first, and I'm going to combine both categories in a bit of a unique move. I'm going to nominate Marco Bezzecchi for the utter disaster that he turned his Grand Prix into on Saturday by crashing out in qualifying. He then managed to shine in the sprint and then had a pretty decent race today, although he wasn't very communicative afterwards, Dave, in the debrief.
I think he hates us more than anything.
Well, he was quite jovial yesterday, or is he just a mood monster?
He's just a mood monster. I don't think I think he's had his. He probably has a day and a half of debriefs in him, and then after that it's all downhill.
I like when you asked what happened in qualifying, and he said, "I crashed," and then I saw you literally take a really deep breath. Okay, why did you crash, Marco?
Yes, exactly. No, well, this is it. This is it. I mean, my tactic with Marco Bezzecchi when he hates debriefs is just to keep on asking him questions until he
batter him into submission.
That's right.
I mean,
yes.
do you agree with me, guys, that this was the brainless and also the brilliance of Marco Bezzecchi this weekend?
It's a fantastic call because it's really typical Bezzecchi. Like he could have been so good, but he wasn't. He managed to mess it up. He shows what he's capable of, and yet he messes up his qualifying.
From one end of the grid to the other in a space of 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's it's a little bit like the case for the rest in MotoGP outside of Borgo Panigale at the moment. So Neil, who was your hire?
My hire was a rider that I think has the world record for consecutive fires on the Paddock Pass podcast, and that is Joan Mir. And I think it's worth throwing some love at Joan for his best performance in a Grand Prix since India 2023. And we know how weird that weekend was and how
everybody was melting.
Everyone was melting, and the results were slightly distorted, and both Hondas were randomly up at the sharp end that weekend. But yeah, Mir just had a very solid ride. Obviously flying the flag solo for the factory Honda team this weekend in light of Luca Marini's absence. And it was kind of what Mir hasn't been doing, which is just keeping it within what he's capable of, not trying to exert himself and go above and beyond the limits of either the bike or himself. And yeah, made solid progress, had a okay start, was I think around 9th, and gradually just built his way up, and then started making some nice moves on Di Gianantonio and I think Maverick. At one point there was a nice little three-way battle there. Yeah, and just as kind of as much as we've written them off, or I've written them off in certain pods this year, it is really nice to just see him happy and smiling and content with life, because it is quite infrequent that we see it. And in light of Johan Zarco completely falling apart this weekend, double zero, Zarco's been the standout Honda rider this year. Mir kind of took the initiative and flew the Honda flag as solo. So
I didn't know there was so much room in your affections for another rider.
He's got a lot of love for riders.
I've just got a lot of love.
He's got a whole lot of love.
And then Joey Dovizioso was here as well this weekend.
Exactly.
It's,
I do think that it was a pleasure to actually watch Joan Mir ride again, because he would look like the Joan Mir that we've seen in the past.
Dave, you were waiting for him to fall off.
I was waiting for him to fall off, and he didn't. He had a really, really excellent race, and like seeing Pecco Bagnaia back, seeing Joan Mir back was a real pleasure.
Dave, so whom do you give gainful employment?
I give gainful employment to Christian Gabarini, Pecco Bagnaia's crew chief, because they dug and they dug and they dug, and then they found something. He needed something.
Or maybe it was the Brembo technician.
It wouldn't have been the Brembo. I mean, like the Brembo technician is probably the Brembo technician from the start of the year and saying, "Why don't you try the 355s? They're much better,
He's that guy in the meeting saying,
No. We don't want to use it. We want to use this. We're changing one thing at a time." And eventually, they've got through everything and they've looked at it and said, "All right, we'll try these." But Gabarini, to me, is one of the absolute best technicians in this paddock. He understands motorcycles. He's never overconfident with the choices that he makes. He's conservative but yet very thoughtful. I think that having Gabarini in his corner, and also if you think of the terrible time that Bagnaia has been through, Gabarini is always calm. He's always flat. He's always, even when there's something amazing happens, like here, Gabarini is pleased, but he's never exuberant. He never gets carried away. He knows that success is brief, and hopefully failure is brief. So yeah, if I'm looking for a crew chief alongside Peter Bomm, I'll be talking to Christian Gabarini.
Well, so like Ducati Lenovo's Brembo technician who's been sitting in the corner of meetings waving his hand saying, "Try this," and it's been ignored. Yeah. Who would you fire?
Who would I fire? It's almost obvious that at some point you have to fire Somkhat Chantra, because he looks terrible on the bike. He's very unhappy. He doesn't look like he's enjoying himself. It is. I mean, like, he could go back to Moto2 and be winning races again, competing for races. He could be performing. He's not performing. He can't ride the bike. He doesn't look happy. And from what I learned this weekend is that the budget that is paying for Somkhat Chantra in LCR Honda is being taken away from riders in Asia, sponsored by Honda Asia, which to me is cannibalizing the future for a rider who really has no future in the class. He looks miserable. Really, for the sake of everyone, he should be swapped out with someone in Moto2.
I think it was acceptable maybe in the last 2 years when Honda was really in the depths of despair. Okay, you know what? The bike is a hunk of junk, and maybe we can give the fourth bike to someone that we don't really think is going to be that fantastic.
Or to learn a bit,
Yeah. but the bike is good now. That could be a lot of riders in Moto2, a lot of riders in MotoGP even would, I think, quite like that seat next year. So the more the season goes on, the more difficult the case it is to make for some cats staying.
The complication is that Idemitsu sponsors it, so there's money coming in from Idemitsu, and Idemitsu want a rider from Asia, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure that they would take Denise Onchu, but Denise Onchu would be a better choice than some cat at the moment.
It's beyond a joke now. I mean, there's plenty of pastures surrounding this track. I mean, you don't want to send Chantra out to them yet, but it is one of those cases, I think, where a rider is fulfilling a certain different aspects, not performance related. Yep. Maybe there are now 1 million more people in Thailand watching MotoGP because he's on the grid.
Yeah.
So
that's a good shout. It's a lot more pressure for him. He's just not enjoying it. And like I say, I think he could be competitive in Moto2 still.
Small milestone though. First time in Grand Prix history we had a Thai rider in each of the 3 Grand Prix categories this weekend. So
and one is leading the Red Bull MotoGP Rookies Cup.
He's Malaysian.
He's in Malaysia.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Danish is and he is a proper talent, that lad.
Neil, who was your fire?
My fire was Miguel Oliveira. I was going to go with Brad Binder, but I just feel so sorry for Brad at the moment. He's so desperately struggling for confidence, and even when he's having his best race of the season, something goes wrong, he just can't catch a break. But Oliveira, it was a hopeless weekend for Yamaha, but even within that, I think Oliveira was the kind of the low point of that. 15th, and
one point though, a whole point.
Yeah, exactly, which is some going this year for him. But in light of the speculation linking Toprak Razgatlioglu with that team next year, from what Oliveira was saying, he knows he's basically got a couple of weeks to save his MotoGP future, it seems. Until, I think he said on Saturday, he's got until the summer break to kind of get his act together. The team are understanding, knowing that he was injured for a good chunk of the season through no fault of his own. But on this basis, where he's now saying he's 100% fit, we're not really seeing any kind of improvements from him.
And Manu Gonzalez gets a go on a MotoGP bike tomorrow. Now, Trackhouse have gone out of their way to say, look, honest, it's not because we're thinking of replacing Raul Fernandez or Ayogura. Certainly not thinking of replacing Ayogura, but that would be strange. But then if Gonzalez turns up and shows some promise, looks good on the bike, then really there's going to be a lot of pressure on Miguel Oliveira.
I think that's something that Moto2 riders should do anyway. They should sign up to be not necessarily substitute, because that's a contract complication, but then test riders also for MotoGP teams. Why can't Dennis Onchu also have a clause in his contract whereby he's testing an RC16 or gaining mileage on it? Because KTM could think, okay, well, take David Alonso, someone you want to invest in long term. We're going to make you the sort of, a test rider for the factory team as well, and therefore you just build up that experience. I don't think it's such a bad idea.
Yeah, but from what I understand, Trackhouse also offered the vacant seat to Diogo Moreira on Saturday, and him and his manager turned it down because, as they explained to me, we're going out on a track where MotoGP riders have been making laps all weekend long. They're immediately going to be up to speed. They're going to be probably on lap record pace at the very start of tomorrow's session, and Diogo's going to come in a complete novice. And what's he got to win? And secondly, if he finishes, say, 4 seconds off the pace, as well as disrupting his Moto2 rhythm, he's going to then maybe have the situation where people are pointing saying, 4 seconds off the pace, you're not cut out for a mid. So
it's just acclimatization. And also maybe you don't check someone who's 1 or 2 years into Moto2. Maybe Aaron Canet, for example, would be someone who's mature enough.
Yeah, but why would you put Canet on the bike? He's never going to go to.
You're going to sign if you.
But he's never going to go to MotoGP. I mean, what does anyone? I honestly don't understand why Trackhouse are putting anyone on that bike. What do they gain from it? They're not gaining any data.
You said that Yamaha are missing, mileage, experience, and speed.
Yeah,
and
but
data.
Manu Gonzalez has got no experience on a Moto2. He can't give you any feedback other than, this feels really strange.
Break on a throttle is.
Plus, he's also going to show, he has the potential to confuse himself. He's going to switch from Pirellis to Michelin's. I mean, when apparently
he's
coming
testing later
27th.
this week with his Moto2 team in Barcelona.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and he's leading the championship. I think
Yeah, exactly. He's leading
there's a
the
lot more to lose than gain, I think.
Yeah, or if he, if he falls off and breaks a scaphoid, breaks a collarbone, it's easy to crash on your first time out on a MotoGP bike. There's a lot of risk for very, very little gain. The other thing is, I mean, yes, it sounds like a good suggestion to put a Moto2 rider on a MotoGP bike. For everyone to get a chance to sort of assess their performance and all the rest of it. But the teams are limited on mileage, especially the independent teams, very limited on mileage. It costs a lot of money to go testing. It's not money that they get back. They get paid to come to, or they get compensation for coming to a race. They get money to do that. They don't get money to go testing. If the rider crashes, which there's a very good chance they will, that's 20, 30, 40, 50k plus all of the rest of the costs. It's very, very risky. The sport needs to be a lot richer before we can afford to start doing that.
Well, in true David Emmett fashion, I'm going to say great points. Say okay, and then completely ignore you and think my ideas are better.
I highly recommend that technique.
Let's wrap up the podcast, guys, with our grades for this Grand Prix. I'm going to go first. We've been quite generous, or maybe righteous, so I don't know, in our sort of recent appraisals of MotoGP
Last two
rounds.
GPs.
Yeah, they've been great. For me, this brings the average a little bit down with a 6. Just because of the racing, it was the Marc Marquez party. Again, my kind of thing with Motorland Aragon was present in that there were people here, 50,000 of them allegedly today, but you don't feel it, you don't know it. It's just so vast and open. It doesn't contain any atmosphere. I mean, we only had sort of one stand really that Marc Marquez was going bananas in front of, and if you think of what happened in Le Mans, I mean, it's a different world. So just to give an update, we are coming back here next year. Motorland Aragon has one more year on the contract, and from what we've heard as well, the director of the circuit, I think, was given a debrief to Spanish media just a little bit before we recorded this podcast, and they want to re-up the contract for another 5 to 6 years, I think, going into sort of 2031. So, but I believe that Dorna have made... Dave's celebrating. Dorna have made some requests. I think they want some upgrades to the structure, the road system, and, Motorland, the first Grand Prix was in 2010, but it already looks a little rough around the edges. So maybe that investment is necessary to keep it here in the Liberty Media era that's sort of, forthcoming. What was your grade?
4. Pretty lousy MotoGP race. I thought it was pretty dull on for the most part. Moto3 and Moto2 were very good, I have to say. But as you say, minimal crowd, 50,000. I think that's maybe down on some of the previous numbers that we've had here. And we already have 3 races in Spain which are well attended in kind of hubs of sort of motorcycling centres in the country. You come here and, I mean, what's it all about? What's the real point of coming here? You're in Jerez, you're in Valencia, you feel like you're kind of part of the centre of the sporting world in Spain, and you come here and you're just like, well, okay, it's a 4th race, but what do we get apart from Dave, blabbering on about how there's so much great walking around here in the kind of the arid landscape? So, yeah, 4.
Dave, I'm going to set the timer at 1 minute.
Haters. You're all haters.
You've got 1 minute
seconds.
to give us your grade.
And don't talk about the hiking, please.
No, right. Well,
unless you want to take one.
I'm going to give it a 7 because I'm not sure about Moto3. Moto3, I'm losing interest because it's turning into the old. I mean, it was 9 riders all abreast.
It was a great race.
No, it was all right. No. Moto2 was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I loved Moto2. I really enjoyed the MotoGP race because it had lots of intrigue. Yes, Marc Marquez walked away. Yes, Alex Marquez was second. Pecco Bagnaia's revival, what a fantastic story. The battle between
Ducatis.
The battle between Aldeguer and Morbidelli, Pedro Acosta coming 4th, Bezecchi's coming through, Joan Mir, your favourite and mine, his revival. That was really, and that was a really good race. And yeah, I just love it here. We should sack off Barcelona.
Is he making a decent fist of this? Oh, I'm not convinced.
I turned off 30 seconds ago. Sorry,
Yeah,
Dave.
you're
What
just
number
jaundiced.
did you pick a number?
I did pick. I gave it a 7.
A 7.
Yeah,
Oh,
which is still very low for me. Well, no, that's not low for me. It's either.
Will you be back next year, Dave?
Of course I will. Hopefully I shall be back with my wife.
Oh, there we go. We hope you'll be back with us for our next podcast as well next week. This has been our review of the Aragon GP. Don't forget to look at rental.com and also pole position travel if you want to consider a trip to any Grand Prix or World Superbike round. Any final thoughts, lads? Or is that it?
If you go to Assen with pole position travel, then you can come and punch me in the face for liking Motorland Aragon. Because I'll be the speaker at their evening.
And you could see Adam making a weird face as he drives onto the track to enter, where it says, "Welcome to the Cathedral."
Oh, yes. Yeah, that annual photograph, such joys. We've got Mugello first. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're about to enter a busy phase. Was it 4 rounds in 5 weeks? MotoGP suddenly starts getting very fast. But anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another show.